Cat Country 107.3, number one for new country. It's Jahna Michal here from the Cat Country Morning Show. I have a very special guest joining me today. This woman has definitely had her world turned upside down over the last few days after she shared a post to Instagram that went viral about what it feels like to be a Black woman and a country fan in today's world. I have Rachel Berry in the building. Well, I guess like on the phone. Governor Murphy just lifted that stay-at-home order. So here we are. Hi, Rachel.
Hi.
So we have so much to talk about today. I know it's just been a whirlwind over the last couple of days, so I don't want to keep you forever. But not only about the post itself are we going to get to, but what's happening in the country today. The death of George Floyd has sparked an awakening in this country with the massive protests and unfortunate cases that everyone loves to group together, even though they're two totally separate things, of the rioting and the looting and the violence. But they're not to be overshadowed, though, by the light bulb I personally believe has finally been lit in so many people's minds that makes them see the key here is unity and equality. That's definitely true for so many after reading your post. So why don't we start off with what inspired you or what actually made you finally put into words what you had experienced thus far within the country music community?
Well, I saw a lot of country music artists start speaking out about it, and it was Blackout Tuesday. And I just thought that was my opportunity to say something or just to speak up and voice my opinion. You know, I honestly did not think, like I said in the post, I didn't think as many people would read it as they did, but that was pretty awesome to get, you know, so many messages of support and love from, you know, not only the country music artists, but just country music fans in general.
I think it's so important because as somebody in the country music world, and I'm obviously a non-person of color, me going to a concert or just me living my life within the world of country music, you never really stop to think about what could be potentially wrong with that experience because you're not experiencing that flaw yourself.
Right.
And so actually hearing somebody speak up and say, listen, it's not just all white people that like country music, guys. Like, that was so powerful to me. And like, I'm not afraid to say it. You know, I feel like so many people are like, oh, well, we never want to act like we exclude or, you know, give off the impression that we exclude anybody. And even though, you know, that might not necessarily be the goal, of course it's not. But I mean, it's definitely present. There's so much ignorance that can come into play when you don't necessarily think the world is watching you and, you know, you're in an environment where true colors can be exposed. And in your post, you had addressed that. I want you to talk about some of the experiences that you've had that might maybe shed a light for the listeners that they can kind of watch out for because their voices might be able to make this not happen again because it shouldn't be happening in the first place. I really wanted you to speak on that.
Well, for me, it's been a lot of like microaggressions, like little comments that are very subtle, but I can get a sense of what, you know, the person is saying. So, you know, I've gotten a lot of, like, if I'm by myself at a concert, I've gotten a lot of, like, wow, you're really brave for being here alone, those type of comments. And then a lot of stares, you know, like when I'm up and dancing with my friends who are primarily white, you know, I feel like I'm being the one that's singled out. Like, oh, let's look at her. Or even like simple things like during a song when I'm singing along, I can tell like someone's looking at me and being like, is she really singing the words or is she just like pretending that she knows that she's singing, you know? Little things like that are in my face, but to anyone else around me, they wouldn't generally notice.
I think that's so hard for people to grasp. I mean, when I was reading that was difficult for me to swallow because it doesn't matter if you're not the one perpetuating it or the cause of it in the first place. It's just, it kind of brings you back to your concert experiences and like, okay, well, was I awake? Did I maybe miss something? And
right.
I feel like it's so important. I mean, as you saw, there were so many artists that were in support And altogether, I think really happy that somebody finally had the courage to stand up and say what's needed to be said for generations now. I mean, music unites us. And even though there might be, a demographic that likes one type of music more than another, it doesn't mean that it's still not universal. You know what I mean? Just because in your part of your world, it's very specific, the audience, doesn't mean that that's all that enjoy what you like to enjoy. And it's about time that it was just said. I mean, I don't even know how else to put it. Like somebody needed to come up and say, listen. And it's not even that people need to watch what they say. I didn't get that message from your post at all, which is actually what made me as a woman. And I mean, even in the country music industry professionally, like I said, it's not that people need to watch what they say. That shouldn't be where your heart is at all, period. That shouldn't even come into your head. You know what I mean?
Right.
How do you feel that your message has been received?
Well, it's funny. I've gotten a lot of nice comments from white people, but I did actually receive one negative comment from a person of color who was, telling me that they go to many country music concerts and they've had great experiences, and that I'm probably just taking everything too personally and I'm just being, sensitive about things.
Really?
And that comment kind of irritated me and upset me more than, a white person saying all lives matter, because this is coming from someone who's, my race, who's, we have the same skin color. And I think, just in general, like, forget about race, diminishing someone's feelings or saying, you're taking this too personally, like that just needs to stop as a country, like we just need to listen to what people are saying, and you don't have to agree, but just say, I hear you, I see you, and then take it from there. But I just think shooting down someone's, viewpoints or saying you're wrong, that needs to stop.
The validity of somebody's feelings is 100% something that it's not a matter of objectivity. Your feelings are subjective to you. Nobody can diminish how an experience and how it made you feel. And I understand completely what you say. I don't understand actually at all. Absolutely. I would never understand. It's impossible for me to understand. But I can see what you mean when you say that it hurts you more compared to if a white person, were to say all lives matter, because the point of that is that comes from ignorance. People not realizing that when you say Black Lives Matter, nobody is negating anybody else's life. It's just these are the lives that are being brutalized right now. These are the people that need our help at the present. So I totally understand your heart, because I feel like if I were ever put in that position, ignorance is a lot more like forgivable than somebody that's lived my experience and still has no empathy.
Right.
What would you like non-people of color to know about your experiences? Because it's almost impossible for us to relate.
Well, I will say that every concert I've been to, I've never regretted going. I've always had a great time at the concert with the live music. But it's always the things that happen beforehand, like the planning. I planned a trip from New Jersey to Texas, and I drove because we were doing the bandwagon tour, and we were going to follow the last 8 shows. And everyone was flying into Texas, so I decided to drive so we would have a car to, go to the other stops. Beforehand, like before going to Texas, I had to actually calculate how far I could get on a tank of gas before I had to fill up, and what city I'd be in when that would happen, and what time. Like the timing of when I would stop. So like I'd planned to get gas up until 1 a.m, and then I knew I couldn't bear going to a gas station after that, because who knows what would happen, Like I'm a female and I'm also a Black female. So I have 2 things going against me. So I just think that's normal for me. But when my white friends found out, they didn't even know that I did that. But when they found out, when I posted my post, they were just like, oh my God, like you should have told us. We could have helped out. We could have flown you in, and then we could have rented the car together. But it's just life for me, It's not anything that I think about.
Right. That wasn't even the
weird.
Point. Right. Because it's
right.
Wow. Yeah.
So just like that, like just things that I have to do beforehand for a show, or like, look up the city that it's in, up north, like where we are, it's not that bad for me. Like I'm pretty good with like, okay, I can go here because I've been to many places up in the north. So I have to be like extra cautious when I'm going down south or even in the Midwest. Just before I buy a ticket, I have to look up where it is and if anything has happened there, the demographics, which again, that doesn't bother me. Like most of my friends are white, but it's just, the people that don't like me for my skin color, that's who I have to worry about.
And it's just something we would never even think about. Well, that actually is the perfect example of white privilege. I've never had to ever plan out my entire night or a trip down to the nitty gritty like that. I'm actually really happy that you were able to share that. Thank you so much. So I believe that by learning about these experiences and being made aware that they indeed do happen, it's real. White privilege is real. And that's the only way that others can even begin to put themselves in another's shoes. So can you maybe shed some light on how, even though people may not realize that they're doing or saying something insensitive, they may still be offending a fan of color?
I would just say, educate yourself. And even now that I'm thinking about it, for me, when someone made an off comment, I could have even just been like, that wasn't right. That offended me. Now that I'm thinking about it, I probably could help out with the situation, from here on out if, an off comment was made. But just educating yourself, reading books. Like I've seen a lot of artists post, books to read. And, even what you said, a lot of people I've seen on Instagram and just social media in general they heard white privilege and they just like, oh, I don't have any privilege. What do you mean? Like, I'm no different than anyone else. And it's not to be like a degrading term. It's just, the fact of the matter is that your skin color gives you better opportunities at the end of the day. Like, you don't have to worry about things that I do just because of your skin color. It has nothing to do with your heart or who you are as a person. It's just the skin color that, affects it.
I'm so happy that you were able to comment on that because I agree with you 100%. I think that there's a huge disconnect between what white privilege actually means versus how it's interpreted. And I think that a lot of the time, I'll go even say, upon hearing the phrase, 90% of white people, and that's just me pulling out a number, but it's happens more often than not. Mm-hmm. People assume that the term white privilege has everything to do with economic privilege because, when you hear the word privilege, that's normally what it's privy to. Right. That is not at all what that phrase means within the context of the Black Lives Matter movement, of everything that all the protesters are trying to bring to the attention of society, nor the place of a white person within the judicial system. So I am so happy that you were able to clarify that because I believe that if more people were aware and educated regarding the true meaning behind the phrase within this context, there may not be as much of a disconnect on social media or whatever the outlet may be that is causing so many arguments. Because at the end of the day, it's based on, in my opinion, a huge misunderstanding.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. A lot of the comments that I've seen on social media were just about that and about, like we said earlier, that all lives matter. And I just think that people need to really understand what those two terms mean, especially with all lives matter. Like, I 100% agree that all lives should matter, but they don't. And that's the problem. Like, it's literally, you're just missing one word. You're saying all lives matter, all lives should matter. And then once they do, then we can be free to say, all lives do matter, but they don't. And it's very, if you watch the news, you can see it. If you read an article, there's many, cases where they just don't matter.
And hopefully with all of the resources out there, the climate will begin to change, not only within just society in general, but even to get more specific within the country music demographic. And I'm just so thankful that you agreed to come on today because I don't think there's a better way to educate than one sharing their own experiences. I think that's the easiest way to reach other people's vulnerabilities that thereby allows them to step into, or at least attempt to step into somebody else's shoes. So Rachel, thank you so much for joining me today and being open and willing to have this conversation, because it can totally be uncomfortable. I feel like, especially for the generations pre-millennial, I think there's definitely a sense of discomfort when discussing anything, absolutely anything that has to do with race. So I'm so thankful that you were able to come on today.
Thanks for having me.
If people want to learn more about your post, contact you, and just see what your entire story is about, why don't you drop your social media right here?
It's rberry313.
rberry313. You can look her up on Instagram, on Twitter, and she's on Facebook. It's Rachel Berry. Thank you so much, Rachel.
Thank you, Jahna.